Instead, we have the opportunity to make a habit of empathy, to recognize ourselves in each other.
The first lesson came during my first year in college. Back then, I had a tendency, I must confess, in my mother's words, to act a bit casual about my future. I rebelled, angry in the way that many young men can sometimes get angry in the way that many young African-American men in particular can get angry, thinking that responsibility and hard work were old-fashioned conventions that didn't apply to me. I partied a little too much, studied just enough to get by. I know none of you suffer from the same malady, except for that guy who yelled out. And once, after a particularly long night, where we had spilled a little too much beer, and broken a few too many bottles, and trashed a little too much of the dorm. The next day, the mess was so bad that one of the cleaning ladies at the dorm walked in and saw it, and she began to tear up. And when a girlfriend of mine heard about this, she said to me something that I'll never forget. She said, "That woman could have been my grandmother, Barack. She spent her days cleaning up after somebody else's mess." Which drove home for me the first lesson of growing up. That the world doesn't just revolve around you. There's a lot of talk in this country about the federal deficit, but I think we should talk more about our empathy deficit. The ability to put ourselves in someone else's shoes, to see the world through those who are different from us. The child who's hungry, the laid-off steel worker, the immigrant woman who's cleaning your dorm room. As you go on in life, cultivating this quality of empathy will become harder, not easy, because it turns out there's no community service requirement in the real world. No one forcing you to care. You'll be free to live in neighborhoods with people who are exactly like yourself. Send your kids to the same schools and narrow your concerns to what's going on in your own little circle. Not only that, we live in a culture that discourages empathy. A culture that tells us all too often that our principal goal in life should be to be rich, thin, young, famous, safe, and entertained. A culture where those in power too often encourage these selfish impulses. They'll tell you that the Americans who sleep in the streets and beg for food got there because they're all lazy or weak of spirit. That the inner city children who are trapped in dilapidated schools can't learn and won't learn, and so we should just give up on them entirely. That the innocent people being slaughtered and expelled from their homes halfway around the world where somebody else's problem to take care of. I hope you don't listen to this. I hope you choose to broaden and not contract your ambit of concern. Not because you have an obligation to those who are less fortunate, although I think you do have that obligation. Not because you have a debt to all those who helped you get to where you are today, although you do have that debt. Because you have an obligation to yourselves. Because our individual salvation always depends on collective salvation. Because it's only when you hitch your wagon to something larger than yourself that you realize your true potential and start becoming full grown. Cultivating empathy, challenging yourself, persevering in the face of adversity. These are qualities that dare us to put away childish things. They're qualities that help us grow up.
See the world through other people's eyes. Now, empathy is a quality of character that can change the world.